They had been rejected everywhere. One by one, the great civilizations of the galaxy had turned them away. Each rejection was polite on the surface, but it carried the same message. They were not wanted. Their biology was fragile, their culture considered backward, their technology outdated. They were not dangerous, but neither were they useful. To every empire, they were a burden, and in the vast emptiness of space, burdens were discarded. Now, they hovered at the edge of the Sol system, the last possibility left to them. Their ships, battered and slow, drifted in quiet formation. Through the thin metal walls, the refugees could see each other's faces, pale and anxious, mirrored in the dim light of distant stars. The leaders had tried to maintain hope, but it had been years since the first rejection, years spent traveling from one star system to another, knocking on doors that never opened. They had hoped the Sol system would be different. Perhaps humans, a species still young in interstellar terms, would have compassion. But even hope felt fragile now. The transmission they sent to Earth was brief, and it carried the weight of desperation. No one could mistake it for arrogance or bargaining. There were no grand claims of riches or conquest, no promises of loyalty or trade. They only asked for a place to stay, a chance to survive. The message reached the planet in scattered bursts, interpreted through the network of satellites and communication relays that humanity had built over decades. Inside the Global Council chamber, humans watched the message with calm attention. There were no cheers, no hurried decisions. Humanity had learned the value of caution from its own history. They had been a species that had built and destroyed, that had learned sometimes the kindest path was not the easiest one. The leaders, scientists, and diplomats spoke in measured tones, reviewing the alien data carefully.
They are weak, one analyst said. They cannot defend themselves.
They cannot offer us technology. They do not have resources we need.
Yes, another agreed. And yet, they have endured.
They have traveled across decades and light years to ask for help. That is not something every species can do. A young diplomat leaned forward, eyes fixed on the data display. We are the last they can ask. If we refuse them, they will have nowhere left to go. The room fell silent. Outside, the Earth rotated beneath them, indifferent and steady. Humanity had faced rejection and hardship itself, though not in the stars. They knew the fear of having nowhere to turn. They had known it in stories and history, in generations of people displaced by famine, war, and climate. Finally, a voice spoke clearly, calm, and simple. We cannot take them in, but we can take them home. It was not a declaration of power, nor a claim of morality. It was a statement of fact, of practicality, of human insight. The other civilizations would not have understood. They would have seen the words and thought them weak, meaningless, or foolish. But humans understood what it meant to rebuild from ruin, to care for something because it needed care, not because it could be exploited. The aliens received the response with confusion. Their first question was immediate. Our home is uninhabitable. Why would you send us back? Humans had anticipated the question. They had known it would come. The answer was simple. Because your home is where your people belong. We will help you restore it, not claim it. We do not need gratitude or loyalty. You only need a chance. For a moment there was silence across the void. Then, one of the alien leaders, small and frail, with eyes too large for its face, spoke with a trembling voice. We do not understand. We have never encountered such a thing. Every civilization wants something. Every civilization demands something. Why would you offer this freely?
The diplomat on Earth smiled faintly.
We have learned that some things are more important than gain. Survival, dignity, and home are among them. The aliens debated among themselves. Some were fearful. They had been trained to expect manipulation, to see offers of help as traps. Others were hopeful, clinging to the last thread of possibility. The human response did not give them a map, did not promise immediate safety. It promised a process, slow and uncertain, but real. That was enough to stir a flicker of belief where hopelessness had dominated. The Council on Earth approved the preparation of ships, not warships, not transports laden with soldiers or weapons. These were vessels designed for endurance, for carrying fragile lives safely across space, for long-term support rather than immediate conquest. Engineers, botanists, climatologists, and diplomats were sent, not generals. Humans traveled not as conquerors, not as masters, but as partners in rebuilding. As the ships approached the alien fleet, the refugees observed in awe. Humans moved with quiet confidence, their technology clean and functional, without the ornate displays that most other civilizations favored. There were no symbols of dominance, no loud claims of superiority. Every system and protocol was designed to preserve life, to minimize risk, to maximize the potential for recovery. For the aliens, the gesture was almost incomprehensible. They had expected, at best, bureaucratic indifference, at worst, subtle hostility. Instead, they encountered patience, planning, and consistency. The humans did not lecture, did not dictate, did not demand. They offered guidance, equipment, and knowledge, and then they waited. Over the weeks that followed, the aliens observed humans at work. They repaired life support systems with meticulous care. They adjusted orbit trajectories to prevent environmental collapse. They prepared seeds, water purifiers, and sustainable shelters. Every action was deliberate, informed by an understanding that life was not a commodity, but a fragile trust. Some of the aliens began to whisper among themselves. They had traveled far, and they had survived terrible trials, but they had never seen anything like this. Humans, who had been small and weak compared to the empires of the galaxy, now displayed a power that was subtle, but undeniable. It was a power rooted in wisdom, patience, and empathy. In their private quarters, the alien leaders discussed what they had witnessed.
"They do not seek to control us," one said. "They do not want us to serve them. They only want us to endure." "Why?" another asked. "Why would any species do this?" A human engineer, walking past their observation window, overheard the question. She paused, smiling quietly. "Because we know what it is to be helpless. We know what it is to be rejected. And we know that helping someone survive is the only way to honor that knowledge." The aliens struggled to understand. Their entire experience had been shaped by civilizations that measured worth in strength, in wealth, in loyalty. Here was a species that measured worth in life itself. As the first human ships entered the decayed system of the refugees' home planet, the aliens felt a mixture of fear and hope. Fear, because they did not understand the humans' methods. Hope, because for the first time in decades, they felt that survival might be possible. The humans began immediate work. They did not rush. They did not make promises they could not keep. They surveyed the planet, analyzed its atmosphere, its soil, its water, and its remaining life forms. They made plans that would take years, perhaps decades, but they made plans that had a chance of succeeding. The alien children, watching from the observation decks of their own ships, were the first to speak aloud. "They are different," one said. "They do not yell. They do not fight. They just fix things."
"Yes," another said.
"And they do not take. They do not take what is ours.
They only give." Among the adults, the sentiment was similar, but wrapped in disbelief. Could a species so small and so young truly possess such strength? Could survival and compassion coexist in the same beings? The answer, they realized, was yes. Humans had survived wars, natural disasters, and countless mistakes, and yet they still chose to act with purpose and care. Weeks turned into months. The aliens began to trust the humans, not blindly, but cautiously. They accepted help, learned to operate new systems, and began to understand the value of patience. It was a foreign concept, and at first, difficult to embrace. In their previous experiences, speed and force had often been the only paths to survival. Here, patience and careful thought were equally powerful. The humans never claimed credit. They never demanded gratitude. They worked quietly, steadily, and consistently. When the alien leaders asked what reward they expected, the humans only smiled. "Your home," they said simply. "That is enough." Slowly, the alien society began to change. Old fears, ingrained over generations of rejection, began to soften. New hopes emerged. Children learned to play in safe spaces that humans had prepared. Communities began to organize themselves around sustainable practices, taught not through coercion, but example. The humans observed, advised, and intervened only when necessary. They did not take control, nor did they demand obedience. They showed what was possible, and then allowed the aliens to make their own choices. It was a strange and unfamiliar way to live, but it worked. By the end of the first year, the refugees' world was still far from perfect. There were challenges and setbacks, as there always would be, but life had returned, fragile and tentative, to a place that had long been considered lost. And through it all, the humans remained a constant presence, steady and patient, never imposing, never demanding, only guiding. For the first time in decades, the alien leaders allowed themselves to feel something they had almost forgotten: trust. They had been rejected. Everywhere, every civilization had turned them away, prioritizing their own interests above all else. But Earth had chosen differently. Without fanfare, without expectation, without claiming superiority, humans had offered what no other species had: a chance to survive and to return home. And in that quiet, steady act, the aliens realized something extraordinary. Humanity, small and imperfect, had the power to change the galaxy, not through force, but through wisdom, care, and determination. The alien leaders watched as the human ships settled into orbit, their sleek shapes reflecting the pale light of the distant sun. Unlike anything they had seen before, these vessels did not carry weapons, banners, or displays of dominance. Instead, they carried supplies, tools, and experts, engineers, scientists, and educators, who spoke of repair and learning rather than conquest. The first human teams descended to the planet's surface carefully, navigating the weakened atmosphere and unstable terrain. The aliens followed from above, their curiosity mingled with fear. They had never witnessed a species so confident, yet so gentle. Every movement of the humans was deliberate, precise, and thoughtful. Nothing was wasted. Nothing was broken. On the surface, the humans began surveying the planet's damaged ecosystems. They measured air quality, water content, and soil density. They took samples, cataloged species, and recorded the smallest details with meticulous attention. Each human action seemed ordinary, yet it carried a weight of purpose. They were not rushing. They were not boasting. They were working as if the planet itself were a delicate being in need of care. The aliens could not hide their amazement. "Why are they so calm?" one asked. Its voice trembled. "Why do they not panic, even when the storms strike or the soil crumbles?" A human engineer glanced up from her instruments. She smiled gently, as if reading the thought across the alien's mind. "We have learned that panic achieves nothing. Careful action achieves everything. The planet will recover if we act wisely and patiently. The same is true for your people." Slowly, the aliens began to observe the humans more closely. They noticed the subtle ways in which they moved, communicated, and worked together. There was no hierarchy in action, only cooperation. Leaders consulted with experts. Experts listened to each other. Every decision was a blend of knowledge, experience, and thought. The aliens began to understand the difference. Other civilizations they had encountered had been efficient, yes, but rigid. Commands came from the top, and obedience was required. Innovation was limited to what served the powerful. Here, humans acted differently. They listened, adapted, and encouraged others to do the same. The aliens began to realize that these humans were powerful not because they dominated, but because they inspired. Weeks passed. The humans constructed the first shelters, not as grand monuments, but as functional, sustainable habitats. They introduced air purifiers, hydroponic gardens, and water recycling systems. Every element was designed to support life without harming the fragile environment. The aliens began to live in these spaces, cautiously at first. Then, with growing confidence, children were the first to embrace the change. Where before they had hidden from storms and scarcity, they now played freely under protective domes, learning to grow food, purify water, and care for small animals. Their laughter echoed across the rebuilding landscapes, a sound so unfamiliar and yet so healing that even the adults felt its effect. The humans taught by example. They did not lecture or demand obedience. When an alien tried to build a shelter incorrectly, the human would show the method and step back, allowing the alien to try again. Mistakes were part of learning, and learning was part of survival. Slowly, the aliens began to adopt the human approach: careful observation, measured action, and respect for consequences. Even the adult aliens began to change. Where once they had relied on the strength of numbers or the speed of decisions, they now began to consider patience as a tool. They watched the humans plant trees in cracked soil, carefully irrigate dying streams, and rebuild damaged ecosystems, and they understood that resilience was not always about immediate results. Sometimes, survival required waiting, learning, and growing slowly. The human engineers worked alongside the aliens on every task. They repaired machinery, taught methods of sustainable agriculture, and designed ways to stabilize the atmosphere. Their technology was advanced, yet practical, created not to dominate the planet, but to restore it. The aliens began to see a kind of intelligence they had never encountered, a combination of creativity, discipline, and empathy. One of the human scientists, an older woman with gentle eyes, gathered a group of alien leaders. One evening, they were huddled near the edge of a recovering river, watching the humans introduce water filtration systems. She spoke quietly, in words simple but precise. "Your people are strong, even if you do not realize it," she said. "You have endured rejection, danger, and isolation. That is a kind of strength many species never learn. Our work is only to help you remember that strength, to guide it, and to protect it while you rebuild your home." The alien leaders listened, unsure how to respond.
But
In their society, knowledge was valued, but trust was earned slowly and cautiously. These humans spoke not as masters, but as guides, offering support without taking credit, instruction without imposing control. Days turned into weeks. The planet's surface, once dry and fractured, began to show signs of life. Small plants sprouted from carefully tended soil. Streams, once stagnant and polluted, began to flow again, clear and teeming with tiny creatures. The aliens learned quickly, adapting the human methods to suit their own needs and understanding. The human approach was not about speed. It was about careful planning, observation, and adaptation. They taught the aliens to think in terms of systems, rather than single solutions. If a river could not be restored with a simple dam, they showed how to cultivate plants to stabilize soil, how to encourage small ecosystems to return balance naturally. It was slow, steady, and effective. Some aliens struggled with patience. Their history had been one of instant solutions, forceful interventions, and quick survival. But observing the humans, they began to see a pattern. Every action was measured and thoughtful. Every step forward was the result of careful consideration. The humans understood that rushing could destroy more than it repaired. In quiet moments, the aliens began to reflect on their own behavior. They had expected aid to come with strings attached, to be a method of control or manipulation. They had expected humans to demand loyalty, resources, or obedience. Instead, humans offered help freely, without expectation. The lesson was clear. True strength lay in supporting others without seeking dominance. The alien children, once timid and fearful, began to thrive. They learned to plant seeds, purify water, and manage small ecosystems. They laughed and ran through fields that humans had begun to restore. Their curiosity grew, guided by patient instruction rather than fear or punishment. In their play, they learned lessons of responsibility, patience, and resilience. As months passed, the aliens began to trust not only the humans but themselves. They discovered that they could solve problems, adapt to challenges, and manage their environment effectively. The humans did not do the work for them. They taught them how to do it themselves. Every success, no matter how small, became a shared triumph. The humans worked steadily, day after day, but they never rushed. They did not grow frustrated with slow progress or mistakes. Their presence was calm, reassuring, and consistent. Even when storms struck or equipment failed, they responded with patience and methodical action. The aliens began to adopt this mindset. They learned that life was not a series of emergencies to be fought, but a series of challenges to be understood and addressed. They began to plan, to observe, to act with foresight. Slowly, the refugee society began to recover not just physically, but emotionally. Hope, long dormant, returned to their hearts. One day, a young alien child asked the human engineer, "Why do you help us? You do not gain anything. You do not take anything from us. You only give." The engineer smiled and crouched down to the child's level. "Because we have been where you are," she said. "We have faced fear, loss, and rejection. We have learned that helping someone survive, giving them a chance to rebuild, is one of the most important things anyone can do. That is why we are here." The child nodded, not fully understanding, but sensing the truth in the words. Around them, the planet continued to change. Trees grew taller, rivers widened, and small animals returned to their habitats. Life was fragile, yet persistent, and the humans' presence allowed it to flourish once more. The alien leaders began to discuss the future. "We have survived because of humans," one said quietly, "but we must learn to survive on our own too. They cannot stay forever." Another nodded. "Yes, but they have shown us how to live, how to rebuild, how to care. That is more valuable than any technology or weapon."
We have learned a new kind of strength. Humans continued their work without seeking recognition.
They repaired habitats, taught agriculture, stabilized the atmosphere, and helped the aliens understand the balance of ecosystems. Every step forward was a lesson in patience, observation, and thoughtful action. By the end of the first year, the planet was far from perfect, but life had returned in a meaningful way. The aliens could walk through fields without fear of collapse, drink water without worry, and see plants and animals thriving once more. The humans had not simply saved the planet, they had taught the aliens to care for it themselves. For the first time in decades, the alien leaders allowed themselves to hope. They had been rejected everywhere, yet here, on the edge of the Sol system, humans had offered not charity but knowledge, patience, and guidance. They had offered something far greater than survival, the ability to thrive. And in that quiet, steady work, the aliens began to understand a profound truth. Humanity's strength did not lie in dominance or technology or numbers. It lay in understanding, patience, and the willingness to help others without expecting anything in return. In that moment, the galaxy's smallest species had revealed the power of compassion, resilience, and wisdom. The aliens would remember this forever. They had been rejected everywhere, yet Earth had chosen to act differently. It had chosen to offer hope, guidance, and the tools for survival without claim or expectation. That choice, small and simple though it seemed, carried more power than any army, any empire, any technology. Humans had shown them that life could be restored not by taking, not by controlling, but by teaching, guiding, and caring. And in doing so, they had changed not just the planet, but the hearts and minds of its people. The aliens watched the humans continue their work, patient and steady, and felt a sense of awe and gratitude, not for the humans themselves, not for their technology or knowledge, but for the example they set, the way they showed that true power came from care, wisdom, and patience. For the first time, the aliens realized that they were not alone. They had a chance to rebuild, to survive, and to thrive. And that chance had been given freely, without demand or expectation, by a species they had once thought too small to matter. The galaxy was watching. It had taken time, but news of Earth's work on the alien refugees' home system had spread. Initially, other civilizations had ignored the Sol system, seeing humanity as minor, unremarkable, and still inexperienced in interstellar affairs. But the quiet diligence of the humans began to draw attention. Observers from distant empires could not understand why a small, young species was willing to invest so much effort without apparent gain. Reports filtered in. Humans had restored entire ecosystems, guided an alien society in learning to care for its own planet, and yet had claimed no authority over the people or the land. The act was so simple, so free of ambition, that other species struggled to interpret it. Where they expected conquest, humans gave instruction. Where they expected claims of loyalty, humans gave freedom. Diplomatic envoys arrived cautiously, orbiting the restored system, sending inquiries. One empire, known for its aggressive trade policies, asked bluntly why Earth was intervening. "You are a minor species," the envoy transmitted. "Why do you invest in a civilization that is of no use to you? What is your goal?" The humans responded calmly, without pride or defensiveness. "Our goal is not to gain or dominate. Our goal is to help life survive where it can." That is all.
The envoy paused.
It had expected a long justification, a series of political or economic promises. Instead, the answer was brief and clear. There was nothing to exploit, no advantage to seize. Only a genuine desire to help. Another civilization, one that specialized in bioengineering, was skeptical. It sent probes to observe Earth's methods. What they saw surprised them. Humans worked slowly, deliberately, and collaboratively. They did not impose solutions. They taught, guided, and then allowed the aliens to act on their own. Mistakes were met with encouragement and explanation, never punishment or interference. It was a method of rebuilding that emphasized learning, patience, and resilience. The observers could not hide their astonishment. No species they had encountered had approached aid this way. In most systems, assistance came with control. It was a lesson humans seemed to ignore entirely. They were not building an empire. They were not creating dependency. They were creating independence. Back on the planet, the aliens noticed changes within themselves. They had learned to manage their resources, repair their homes, and cultivate their lands. They began to act without guidance in small ways, experimenting with planting methods, water management, and energy collection. The humans watched carefully, offering advice only when needed, allowing the aliens to discover solutions on their own. The alien leaders held a meeting one evening. The sky above shimmered with auroras, the result of the human efforts to stabilize the planet's magnetosphere. The leaders spoke quietly, reflecting on the past months.
"We have learned much," one said. "The humans have not forced us."
"They have only shown us the way. We have begun to trust ourselves again." Another nodded. "And yet, the galaxy watches. They will not understand. They will question why humans act without claim or gain." "They do not seek understanding," the first leader replied. "They only act. That is what makes them powerful in ways we cannot yet measure."
On Earth, the Global Council received reports of the growing attention.
Some leaders were concerned that other civilizations might see human methods as interference, or worse, as a threat. If other species began to adopt the human approach, it could undermine centuries of political control and trade dominance.
We are being watched.
one council member said.
Some may try to challenge us diplomatically.
Others may demand we stop helping. They will not understand that our work is not about power. Another member responded calmly. That is their misunderstanding. Our work is about creating resilience, not control. If other civilizations judge us, they will do so without the understanding we already have. That is their choice. And so, the humans continued their work, steady and unshaken. They visited cities built by the aliens, inspecting air filtration systems, water purification stations, and agricultural projects. They taught, advised, and sometimes simply observed. Their presence was reassuring, a constant that encouraged the aliens to take bold steps on their own. Meanwhile, messages from distant civilizations grew more frequent. One empire sent envoys to negotiate assistance rights. They sought permission to monitor the planet's development, to collect knowledge, or to establish influence over the alien society. The humans listened carefully. No, they said simply. We will not grant control. We will not give influence. We are here to help the aliens help themselves, nothing more. The envoys were baffled. Every other civilization in their experience had sought advantage. Every act of aid had a cost or expectation. Humans refused all forms of exchange or demand. They were not weak, nor naive. They were deliberate. They were choosing the long path of patience and respect. The aliens watched the negotiations from orbit. They realized that humans had created a model of interaction the galaxy had never seen. Humans could have used the aliens' gratitude or dependence to gain power, yet they did not. Instead, they insisted that the aliens act as equals, capable of making their own choices. The young alien engineers, inspired by human methods, began working on energy systems for the planet. They constructed solar arrays and simple wind generators, learning by trial and careful observation. Mistakes were common, yet the humans did not interfere unless safety was at risk. The lesson was clear. Independence was built through guidance, not control. Human biologists introduced methods to restore local flora and fauna. Small animals were reintroduced, carefully monitored, and encouraged to adapt naturally. The aliens were taught to observe, record, and respond thoughtfully. The process was slow, but effective. As months turned into years, the alien society began to transform. Communities were stronger, more self-reliant, and more resilient. Children learned practical skills, adults relearned patience and planning, and leaders understood the value of thoughtful action over immediate results. The humans did not rule, but they had instilled knowledge and confidence. Some of the alien leaders began to fear what the galaxy would think.
Other civilizations will question this approach, one said. They will see our independence as a threat to their control, another responded thoughtfully. Let them watch.
We have gained more than they can understand. Our society is stronger because we act responsibly and independently. Humans have shown us a model that no empire could impose by force. Meanwhile, distant observers continued to take notes. Scholars and scientists from other systems studied the methods humans had used. Some began to whisper that perhaps there was an alternative to domination, a way to guide without exploiting. But few had the courage to adopt it openly. The galaxy was built on power and control, not patience and trust. On the planet, the aliens began to create educational systems modeled on human examples. Knowledge was shared freely. Experimentation was encouraged. Failures were treated as learning opportunities, not punishments. Slowly, a new culture emerged, one that valued responsibility, observation, and collaboration over fear and competition. The humans remained present, but their role diminished over time. They were advisors, teachers, and observers, not rulers or overseers. The aliens learned to rely on themselves. Every success, every innovation, every act of restoration became their own. One evening, the alien leaders gathered to reflect on the changes. We have been given more than survival, one said. We have been given understanding, patience, knowledge. Freedom! Another nodded. And we owe them nothing. They have given without expectation. That is the greatest lesson of all. Humans, quietly observing from the nearby ship, smiled at the reflection. They did not claim credit, nor did they offer praise. They had seen the results and knew their purpose was fulfilled. The aliens were no longer dependent. They had regained the ability to act, think, and create independently. Diplomatic messages from the galaxy continued, some critical, some curious. Empires questioned why Earth had chosen to intervene, why humans had refused influence, and how they could maintain such a model of aid without gain. Earth responded consistently. Their goal was life itself. They would not claim it, dominate it, or profit from it. The galaxy began to whisper about humans, not as a power to fear, not as conquerors, not as traders or scientists, but as a species that could teach independence, resilience, and collaboration without exploitation. This subtle power, quiet but undeniable, began to shift perceptions. The aliens noticed the change within themselves most clearly. They no longer feared the vastness of space or the indifference of other civilizations. They had learned to survive, to thrive, and to rebuild. The humans had not done it for them. They had shown them how to do it themselves. That knowledge was more valuable than any technology, more enduring than any weapon, and more freeing than any offer of protection. In the growing silence of the restored planet, life moved forward. Trees grew taller, rivers flowed steadily, and small creatures returned to their habitats. Children laughed and learned, adults worked and planned, and leaders guided without coercion. Every success was a testament to the combination of alien determination and human guidance. The galaxy continued to watch, uncertain, confused, and intrigued. Humans had shown a new model of interaction, one that did not rely on power, manipulation, or dominance. They had acted with patience, wisdom, and respect. They had restored a lost world without claiming it. And the aliens, once rejected everywhere, realized that they were no longer helpless. They had a home again. They had knowledge, skills, and confidence. And they had learned a lesson far more valuable than survival. They had learned to trust themselves, guided by a species that acted not for gain, but for the simple purpose of helping life endure. The humans continued their work quietly, steadily, and without fanfare. They did not announce themselves as heroes. They did not demand recognition. They only acted, patiently, deliberately, and with care. And in that action, they reshaped the galaxy's understanding of what strength could be. Strength was not domination. Strength was not conquest. Strength was the patient guidance of life itself, the careful teaching of independence, and the steady cultivation of trust. And in showing the galaxy this simple truth, humanity had begun to become something far greater than its size, its technology, or its history might have suggested. The aliens had been rejected everywhere, and yet, here on the edge of the Sol system, they had been given more than survival. They had been given a model for life, a path forward, and the tools to become their own masters, once again. All thanks to a species that refused to claim, exploit, or dominate, and instead chose to teach, guide, and trust. Years had passed since the humans first arrived in the alien home system. The refugees, once fragile and dependent, had transformed into a society capable of sustaining itself. The barren landscapes now teemed with life, and the air carried the faint but unmistakable scent of growth and renewal. The humans had not stayed as rulers or overseers. They had remained as quiet guides, gradually stepping back as the aliens learned to stand on their own. The galaxy had not forgotten. Stories of Earth's unusual approach spread slowly at first, whispered among minor systems and scholars, then discussed in council halls and embassies. Most civilizations could not understand it. A species that helped without taking, that guided without controlling, that invested years of effort without seeking profit or allegiance. It was unprecedented. Some viewed it as naive, even dangerous. Others, quietly, began to reconsider their own approaches. Within the alien system, the society had begun to flourish. Crops grew in organized fields, animals thrived in restored habitats, and water systems ran clean and steady. Communities no longer operated in fear of scarcity or collapse. Education became a central focus, with young aliens learning practical skills, ecological balance, and the human principles of observation, patience, and thoughtful action. Adults, too, adapted. Long-forgotten customs of cooperation and mutual support resurfaced, replacing suspicion and isolation. The humans observed quietly from orbit. They no longer intervened unless absolutely necessary. When small errors arose, they offered guidance and left the aliens to correct the problem themselves. Every success was the aliens alone. The humans smiled at their progress, knowing that the greatest reward was not recognition, but the growing independence of those they had come to help.
The aliens gathered one evening to celebrate a milestone. The first fully self-sufficient city had been completed.
Humans were present, but only as invited guests, not organizers. The city, built by alien hands under human guidance, stood as a symbol of achievement. Water flowed cleanly through its channels, plants grew on its terraces, and the streets were alive with movement and learning. A young alien, barely able to remember the days before the humans arrived, looked up at the sky and whispered, "We can live here now. This is our home again." Older leaders nodded. They remembered the despair of the journey, the rejections from countless civilizations, and the hopelessness that had followed. Yet now, they saw the fruits of patience, guidance, and trust. They realized the humans had given them more than survival. They had given them the knowledge to thrive independently. As the celebration continued, messages arrived from across the galaxy. Scholars, envoys, and diplomats sought to understand Earth's methods. Some came with skepticism, expecting hidden motives or demands of allegiance. Others came with curiosity, hoping to learn how such a small young species could accomplish what empires could not. The humans responded with consistency. They offered explanations, demonstrations, and advice, but no claims, no demands, no political leverage. They answered questions about technology, ecology, and societal guidance, but they refused to interfere in the governance of the alien society. They had proven their power, not through force, influence, or wealth, but through the quiet cultivation of independence. Galactic powers began to take notice. Leaders who had once dismissed Earth as insignificant realized that the humans' approach could not be ignored. Their model of aid, patience, and guidance was reshaping a system entirely on its own, without any need for weapons, conquest, or wealth. It was a subtle influence, yet profound. Back on the planet, the aliens reflected on the long journey. They had been rejected everywhere. Every civilization had turned them away. They had endured hardship, isolation, and despair. Yet here, they had been given a chance, not to be controlled or indebted, but to rebuild, learn, and grow. Humanity had offered them freedom, guidance, and trust, and in return, had asked nothing but the dignity of effort. The aliens realized a new kind of strength within themselves. They had learned to manage their resources wisely, balance their ecosystems, and govern their communities responsibly. They had learned to think in systems, to anticipate consequences, and to act with consideration. These skills were far more valuable than any technology or gift the humans could have given. They were tools for life itself. In private moments, some of the alien leaders spoke candidly to the humans. "You have changed everything for us," one said. "Not by ruling, not by giving, but by teaching. You could have taken control. You could have demanded loyalty. You did none of those things. Why?" A human replied simply, "We know what it is to be helpless. We know what it is to be rejected. We know the value of life, of home, and of hope. We act because we have learned from our own past. That is all." The aliens were silent, not because they did not understand, but because the simplicity of the truth was overwhelming. It was not flashy, it did not assert dominance, yet it carried a force more powerful than most empires could muster: wisdom, patience, and care. Years continued to pass. The aliens became capable of handling every challenge independently. When storms came, they rebuilt. When resources were scarce, they innovated. When the unexpected occurred, they adapted. All the while, the humans remained nearby, ready to advise, but never to command. Other civilizations, observing from afar, began to reconsider their own methods. Some quietly adopted aspects of Earth's approach in minor ways. They began to see that strength was not only measured in force or control, but in the ability to empower others to thrive independently. Some were cautious, fearing change, while others were inspired. Slowly, a shift began in how civilizations approached aid and guidance. In the alien cities, a festival was held to commemorate the planet's recovery. Humans attended as honored guests, welcomed not as rulers, but as friends and teachers. Streets were filled with life, laughter, music, and celebration. Children performed dances learned from humans, while elders recounted the history of hardship and renewal. The alien leaders, now confident and capable, addressed the gathering. "We have been given a second chance," one said. "We were rejected everywhere, and yet, through the patience and guidance of humans, we have learned to rebuild, to survive, and to thrive. Our home is alive again, and it is because of the care we were shown, not the control we were forced under." The crowd erupted in quiet applause. They had endured despair, witnessed hope, and now celebrated independence. Every human present felt the significance of the moment. Their mission was complete, not because they had built a world, but because they had taught a species to build one themselves. Across the galaxy, news of the restored planet and its thriving society reached other systems. Scholars, diplomats, and leaders debated what had been achieved. Some could not understand it, insisting that humans had surely gained something in return. Others quietly began to recognize the profound lesson: true influence does not always require domination. It can emerge from guidance, patience, and trust. Back on the planet, the aliens finally took stock of what they had learned. They were no longer fragile. They were no longer dependent. They were capable, confident, and resilient. They had survived the hardships of exile, learned from humans, and rebuilt a home that was fully theirs. A young alien child approached one of the human engineers during the festival.
"Will you leave us?" the child asked.
The engineer smiled. "We will always be here if you need guidance, but we will not take control." "You are capable. You have learned.
This is your world now." The child nodded, a spark of understanding in their large eyes.
It was a lesson that had been taught not in words alone, but in months of observation, practice, and careful instruction. Independence was earned, trust was built, and life could flourish with patience and wisdom. As night fell over the restored cities, the aliens looked up at the stars. The galaxy was vast, uncertain, and sometimes harsh, yet they no longer feared it. They had been given a chance to survive, to learn, and to thrive. They had been guided by a species that had shown them the value of care without expectation. Humans remained quietly in orbit, observing the cities, the fields, and the rivers. They did not boast of their achievements, nor did they demand gratitude. Their satisfaction came from seeing life endure, from witnessing a society regain independence, and from knowing that their work had created lasting change. The galaxy continued to watch, still puzzled by Earth's methods, still unable to fully grasp the quiet power of guidance without dominance. But slowly, patterns began to shift. Other civilizations saw that independence could be cultivated, that strength could arise from care, and that influence could be gained not through conquest, but through wisdom. In the alien cities, Life continued to grow. Children learned to innovate, adults learned to plan and collaborate, and communities thrived under their own management. Humans had provided guidance, knowledge, and patience, but the society's success was entirely its own. Finally, the alien leaders spoke among themselves in quiet reflection. "We were rejected everywhere," one said. "And yet, we have found home, knowledge, and confidence, not because anyone forced it upon us, but because someone chose to guide us patiently, with care, and without expectation." Another nodded. "Earth has shown us that true strength is not in domination. It is in teaching, trusting, and empowering others. That is a power the galaxy will never forget." The humans, observing from above, smiled quietly. Their work was complete, not because they had built a civilization, but because they had taught one to build itself. The aliens were no longer dependent. They were free. They were thriving. The galaxy in time would come to understand the lesson as well. Humanity's quiet strength lay not in conquest, not in technology, not in armies or resources, but in patience, guidance, and the unwavering belief in the potential of life itself. And in that understanding, the smallest, youngest species in the Sol system had become something far greater than anyone had expected. They had become a symbol of hope, independence, and the enduring power of care. The aliens had been rejected everywhere. Earth had said only, "Go home." And in saying so, it had given them everything.